So, as many of you know, I have a teenager. It's a joy, most of the time. She's getting ready to head off into band camp for a week this week and spend time with friends, learning. And you know, it got me thinking that there are times when I would love to just keep my almost 15-year-old at home as much as possible, right? To protect her, to keep her safe, to have her in an environment where I know what she can expect, to keep her safe from school shootings and violence in public places, to keep her safe from politicians trying to change her school curriculum, to keep her safe from children who can be cruel to one another. I would love to just keep her home, right? Like, wouldn't that be easier? But that's not the way it works, is it? That's not the way that children become adults and that we find our way in the world. We aren't meant for that sort of protected, safe, comfortable environment. We have to send our children out with all the attendant risk involved in it, so that they can become the people that God intends for them to be. That's how they grow and mature and learn. I think we forget that as adults. We like to be comfortable, right? It's so much easier to just not risk, not put ourselves out there. And then along comes the day of Pentecost, a reminder that God calls us out of our comfort and into discomfort. The story unfolds as the apostles were doing what they had been doing for the last month and a half. That is, staying safe, right? Remember, they killed Jesus. And these are the people who are known as Jesus' followers. It's pretty likely that they could get wrapped up really quickly in a conspiracy charge. That they could find themselves in the same condition that Jesus found himself. And so they stayed, by and large, either up in Galilee, away from the authorities in Jerusalem, or when they were in Jerusalem, safe and sound behind a locked door. Teenager stuck at home. And they were pretty happy with that arrangement. They were pretty comfortable with that arrangement. They took care of one another. They went out when they had to, but more or less they kept to themselves. And then the day of Pentecost comes. And the Spirit fills that room and fills those individuals. And essentially the Spirit gives them a megaphone and says, "We're right here. Come and find us if you want." Spirit gives them a megaphone and sends them out, and they go from being gathered in this room by themselves to proclaiming out on the street in the middle of crowds. The Spirit comes along and gives them a swift kick to the rear and says, "Get out of the house. Get out of your comfort zone and do what you have been called to do. Grow into what you have been called to grow into." You see, we know with children, with young people, that they have to grow and mature, right? Like, it's inevitable. We're worried if they don't. We forget that that's what we have to do as well as people of faith. Paul talks about this over and over again as we've encountered this year. Paul talks about those who are immature in the faith and who like children need breast milk, and those who are mature in the faith and need the meat of faith. Right? And so the goal then is to move from one to the other, to not just stay where we're at. But if we grow and mature, if we grow through the Spirit's power in our faith, it means we have to move out of our comfort zone and into discomfort. We have to move beyond the things that just make us feel good. We have to get off our couch and go out into the world and do what needs to be done. And there are things to be done for sure. There is so much to be done. One of my favorite theologians, Phyllis Tickle, talks about how there are patterns to the history of the world. So you start with when Jesus and the first church and the first Pentecost, and if you jump 500 years, there's this huge thing that happens where the church goes from being this underground movement to being the most powerful institution in the world around the year 500. And 1,000 years later, the church splits between East and West and transforms what it looks like. And 500 years after that, in 1500, the Reformation happens, and it transforms how the church looks in the world. And 500 years after that is now. We're in a moment, folks. We're in a moment where the church, as a people, cannot remain as comfortable as we have always been. We're in a moment where we have to speak out for the values of the gospel in the world, where the witness of the church is needed in the world. We've talked about it. Hatred has gotten louder in this country and the world. There's no doubt about it. Hatred has gotten bolder. Discrimination has gotten bolder. Exclusion and cutting people out has gotten bolder. The question is, and always has been, what will the church do in this moment? What will we, as people of faith, do in this moment? I love the story from Ezekiel. It's one of my favorite weird stories in the Bible, right? Because it talks about these dry bones being brought together and brought to life by the Spirit, by the breath of God. And God's point, as he talks to the prophet Ezekiel, is that is like the people of God, that we have become. And whenever we see the people of God in Scripture, it's we, it's us, right? We have become dry bones. We have become exhausted, too tired. They say to God in Ezekiel, we're finished. We can't do this anymore. We're overwhelmed. And God says, I am your strength. You don't have to do it by yourself. That's the power of Pentecost. We see what's laying in front of us as the church, what our call is to proclaim the good news, and we think, how can I possibly do that? What difference can one David make in the world? What difference can any one of us or even 10 of us together do? And God says, I make the difference. God says, I am the one who does the work, moving through you in the power of the Spirit. Just as God brought life to those dry bones, God brings life to us and sends us out into the world to do God's work. Just as God filled those first apostles with the power of the Spirit and they transformed the world, God fills us with the gift of the same Spirit. In as far as we are willing, in as far as we make room for the Spirit's movement in our lives. I am convinced that in this moment, whether you're talking about things that are happening in our nation or things that are happening in our community or what is going on in the life of our congregation, I am convinced that this is a powerful moment for the movement of the Spirit if we are willing to be led by the Spirit. If we are willing to go where the Spirit takes us. Here's what I know. Following the Spirit is never easy. Following the Spirit calls us to cooperate with that Spirit. God never works through us without us. And so we have to go and do where the Spirit brings us and what the Spirit brings us to do. And it may be uncomfortable, and it may not be the thing that we want to do on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning, but it's what we're called to do. And I know that what the Spirit calls us to do, the Spirit gives us the strength to do. We are capable of so much more than we ever envisioned. Jump back to that first Pentecost story, and you have 11 men, a handful of women, mostly hicks from Galilee, from out in the sticks, uneducated folks, day laborers. 11 of them. And they went from 11 of them to being the largest faith in the world, to transforming the face of the world. Just 11 of them. We've got like 3 times that here in this space. Can you imagine what we could do with 3 times what they had? Ha! I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what the Spirit is up to in your life and in our community.